Greenpeace is under fire over an advertising campaign calling for urgent action to save our Great Barrier Reef. But some experts here in Australia say our reef is doing just fine and Greenpeace is simply scaremongering. And the CEO of Greenpeace Australia Pacific, David Ritter, joins us this morning to take a look at this, along with Queensland Senator Matt Canavan. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, guys.
Now, we'll take a look at these ads. The first one, it's not even of the Great Barrier Reef, but it's an image of a devastated Philippines. It's showing the destruction and comparing the two. Is this blatantly misleading, Greenpeace?
No, look, of course it's not. I mean, the ad's designed to make a very, very simple point, which is that one image is a macro of beautiful living coral and the other is an image of dead coral. We want to keep one and not have the other. We never said it was about the reef. It's designed to make a very simple point and we stand by it.
But to make that point, shouldn't it be more authentic? Shouldn't it have been of an Australian reef, or is that just splitting hairs?
No, look, I don't think so. I mean, it's like shooting a road safety advertisement in one state for another state. It's just very, very simple. It's an image of living coral and dead coral. We want to keep one, we want to avoid the other. It's as simple as that.
The other ad is on the London Tube, which is being shown as well. It's a fundraiser, effectively. It's saying that people urgently need to donate to Greenpeace because time is running out, only 4 weeks left. Again, the question must be asked, David, scaremongering here, panic. Why sort of ramp it up to such a degree?
Well, we fundraise, we always have, and we're proud of it, because the reason why we fundraise is because we're an independent organisation.
But the reef's not going to die in 4 weeks.
We don't take money from government, we don't take money from business. The 4-week scenario is important because we've got a big UNESCO meeting in 4 weeks. And listen, Mr Abbott's Environment Minister, Greg Hunt, has admitted that half the reason why the government's acted is because of external scrutiny, because they've had pressure put on. So urging people to keep taking a look, to keep putting the pressure on the government to do the right thing is really just taking Mr Hunt's advice. And look, if I can, I'd actually just like to say a really big thank you to the tens of thousands of ordinary people, mums and dads, who do chip in every month or whatever it might be.
Well, I'm one of those people. I'm on the mailing list. I get urged to do this kind of thing all the time, and sometimes I find valuable sources of stories, and it gives ideas for us here in the media. But I'm on that mailing list. But Matt, your view of the way Greenpeace is going about this, is it being a negative for Queensland and tourism?
Well, Cameron, I was in Cairns last week and people up there tell me that the tourism industry is only growing at 3% a year compared to Victoria at 14%. The lower dollar should be getting more tourists in. But some of these campaigns being run by green groups are definitely impacting our overseas visitors who would otherwise come here. Now, on most Sunday mornings, Cameron, I don't come on national TV. I usually head up to church with a few reluctant kids, and from that church I can see the reef. I live on the reef. And I can tell you what, the reef does not need Greenpeace, but Greenpeace needs the reef to take in all of these donations. David hit the nail on the head. It's all about fundraising for them. They're a $400 million organisation around the world, and we are sick and tired of people from down south trying to tell us how to manage our assets.
Oh, all right, but, you know, I know a lot of operators who need the reef to be there in existence and be healthy for them to survive. I do a lot of diving. I'm in contact with people regularly in that industry, and the reef is under threat. There is harm to the reef.
Absolutely. So, and I was just up in Green Island just a month ago with the kids. It's fantastic. And it's still fantastic. That's the main message I'd like to get across. People should come and visit the reef. It's great. But there are risks. We've had massive cyclones go through the area in the last 10 years, and that's accounted for about 50% of the damage. We've got a huge problem with crown of thorn starfish. We've got a massive program to destroy them.
You've also got a problem with development impacting on the reef too.
Well, that impact on development
the Environment Minister has said as much.
It can be managed. It is being managed and should be managed. No one is arguing that we should have unrestricted development or that we should allow ships to go through the reef wherever they like. But we need to manage it because North Queensland needs a tourism sector and it needs a mining sector and it needs jobs, and that's where I live and I want to see it flourish.
If we go back to you, David, one way to create awareness of things is to expose people to it. Like people who go whale watching or swimming with whales, they come back, they're in love with whales, they want to save the whales. So going to the reef is one of the greatest things you can do for the reef because you come back wanting it to be preserved. Aren't you chasing people away?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the reef is this wonderful, beautiful, natural wonder of the world, and we completely back the tourism industry because it's a terrific, sustainable industry. The greatest threat to the reef is coming from climate change. Mr Abbott's own report into the reef says that. The greatest driver of climate change is the coal industry. The big issue here is the Australian government going to do something about the out-of-control coal industry in Queensland? Because we've got very eminent scientists saying you can have a Great Barrier Reef into the future with the tourism industry and all of that, all those wonderful things, or you can keep expanding the coal industry, but you can't have both.
Do you think that you're going to review... I just want to ask with the advertising, are you going to have a think, though, about the way that you approach this sort of thing? Because really over-egging it too much does raise the risk of turning people away, of questioning the motives of Greenpeace, when clearly that's, you say, not the case. People are going to wonder, well, what's true here?
Oh, no, look, I think absolutely not. We stand by the ads. I mean, what could be more urgent than looking after our Great Barrier Reef? If we've lost 50% of the coral cover of the reef in 30 years, can you imagine the outcry? 50% of the Sistine Chapel was gone. We absolutely have to do what we can to communicate as effectively as possible that the reef needs our help, it needs our voice, and we absolutely stand by that.
We sort of covered that at the start. What's your response, Matt?
Well, we already have a plan in place for the reef for the next 50 years. It's a plan that UNESCO has now ticked off on, or the advisory committee to the UNESCO in the last 4 weeks, and that's something we need to get on and do. And we don't need organisations from overseas, from down south, telling us how to manage our asset. We rely on it very much, and we are not going to change the temperature of the globe from North Queensland. We're not going to be able to change climate change just from our little patch. That needs a global response.
That's true, Matt, but there is a feeling, and a growing feeling, I think, in the Australian public, that these big companies, these big resource companies, are not paying their fair share of tax, and maybe they're not doing enough to hand back to communities like the tourism industry and make better steps and more financial steps to preserve the reef.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, Cameron. I mean, they do pay a lot of tax, but I live in these areas and I go out to the mining communities, and at times, absolutely, I'd love to see mining companies do more. I'm particularly concerned about the lack of jobs sometimes given to people in the regions and fly-in, fly-out practices. But at the same time, we need a mining industry. We would be bankrupt as a country without it, and we've got to find a way to balance it. The reef, tourism and all these things, but organisations like Greenpeace don't want to be part of that balance. They have an extreme view that we shouldn't have a mining industry
What do you think would be the single biggest change you could make to preserve the reef, David?
Well, look, the science is very clear. You can continue to expand the coal industry, or you can have the Great Barrier Reef. You can't do both. Now, it's really incumbent on the government to wake up and to recognise that they have to act in order to save the Great Barrier Reef. And you know, I want to really stress that there are lots of people who care about nature, who care about our beautiful world, who live in Queensland. And this idea that in some way it's only people outside the state is simply...
But that's a bit simplistic, because simply digging coal out of the ground in itself doesn't do anything to the reef. It's burning the coal in China. Shouldn't you be targeting those companies? Shouldn't you be targeting China and saying, hey, be more clean to our air? It's hurting our reef globally.
Well, of course, China needs to act, but I think it's really, really important to lay out exactly how coal does threaten the reef, because it threatens it in multiple ways. Coal is the largest driver of climate change. Climate change is the greatest threat to the reef through ocean acidification, through coral bleaching, but coal also directly threatens the reef through the increased shipping traffic and the risk of accidents. It also threatens the reef because of the dredging and dumping that, you know, the coal industry wants to do there.
But credit where it's due, because the Queensland Government and the Environment Minister federally, they have brought in plans and they've got an idea and a strategy to try to tackle development and to try to have these two things, the reef and the coal industry, working together.
Well, I'm very, very pleased that you raised that, because the Reef 2050 plan is silent on climate change and is silent on the coal industry, and it's why the Reef 2050 plan, although it does some things, is at base an outright failure, because as the scientists keep saying, you can keep expanding the coal industry or you can have the healthy Great Barrier Reef, but you can't have both.
The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority's job is not to try and change the temperature of the globe. The Department of Environment has other policies in place to do that. We have a direct action policy at the moment to try and reduce our emissions, but ultimately the only way we're going to deal with climate change is on a global level, and we're not going to do that from here in Australia. And we need industries like this to continue to provide jobs. And I think even the Labor Party, in their carbon tax policies, saw a future for the coal mining industry in the context of trying to tackle climate change. And I certainly want to see a coal industry thrive in the future.
Matt Canavan, David Ritter, thanks for your talk this morning.
Thank you very much.
Good lively chat.
Yes.